Welcome everyone to the first episode of Cross Strategic Vision. My name is Mohak Gambhir. I'm a research assistant at Center for Land Warfare Studies. This is a new initiative to guide public discourse on national, regional and global security, as well as technological and military affairs. Today we are talking about understanding China's recent aggression against India, and for that we have Dr. Amrita Jash here with us today. Dr. Jash is a research fellow at Center for Land Warfare Studies. She holds a P.hD in Chinese Studies and was a visiting faculty at University of Cambridge. Welcome, Dr. Jash.
Thank you for having me.
So, Dr. Jash, I'd like to begin by highlighting the two things that have dominated our discourse in the last few months. Covid-19, of course, is one of them, and the other being China. So, we're all aware that we have a standoff going on with China at the line of actual control. And in that context, I'd like to ask you, to what extent do you feel that COVID-19 has played a role in guiding China's recent aggression against India?
Thank you, Mohak, for that question and also the very timely highlights that you have put forward. In my opinion, I will say that COVID-19 was a trigger point, let's say, because we have to see the timeline. China's aggression in eastern Ladakh comes at the time of April-May,
yes,
which is very much at a time that, where COVID-19 picks up, because on 11th of March, it was declared a pandemic.
yes.
And immediately after that, we are seeing China's aggressive designs unfolding in the Himalayas. And it was not just the Himalayas, we see South China Sea, China's stint in East China Sea. So yes, the COVID-19 was a trigger point, and what caused it was there was a simultaneous backlash towards China, the international isolation towards China, that China needs to pay, China is answerable to this catastrophe. So when you have this growing global resentment, you see there's China which constantly struggles with its responsible image factor. All of a sudden we are seeing a totally irresponsible China, which is vetted by most of the powers, not just Asia's power, but even its own allies, which very few it has, but because Africa too resisted.
Of course.
So there is a global resentment, so what do? There's a loss of face already happening. So to prove your mettle, I will say that China's forays into the Himalayas was to prove your mettle, prove itself that just see, I have the wherewithal, even despite this pandemic, which others don't have. So simultaneously, so it was a messaging that China wanted to put across to its adversary. So in the lineup for the United States, Japan, countries surrounding the South China Sea, and of course India became the battle space for it.
Okay, so it seems counterintuitive to go out on the offensive against a large neighboring country like India, be an aggressor at a time when the whole world is against you. So how is it beneficial for China in the long term, or even in the short run for that matter?
Well, if I have to put it into a perspective, choosing India, because if you see China's trajectory, in the fallout of COVID-19, China still holds that, it just had, as compared to its 1.4 billion population size, the casualties were far less.
Yes.
But we see that United States becomes, the main ground successively, India. So things with what started in Wuhan got played out, in a magnified way in areas beyond Wuhan. And China's own, then China started purporting that, how well we have resolved this pandemic, which others didn't do. So there was always a challenge that it was setting to the world at large, that we are an exception. Okay, so in the meantime, I think if we go with the Chinese brain, any country, a size of India, is more engaged into, taking care of its own people. Like economy is the factor, sustainability, your own people, because survivability. That opportune time China that let's strike now, because the country is engaged in everything else of national power. So this gives you enough reason, because you have to see China, because it started in Wuhan. China was, for, if I can call it, was a beneficiary because it knew how it unfolded. Other countries were taken by surprise.
Yes.
So they at least had that added advantage. And not to forget, China's military modernization, military capabilities are, on a very rapid and robust, speed it is taking place. And so then these all factors come together, and Xi Jinping, you need to know that he is not following Deng Xiaoping's dictum of keeping a low profile, hiding your capabilities, biding time. Completely
yes.
not. Xi Jinping is an epitome of a confident China, a strong China, and what better than now to prove your mettle? So that's where I would like to argue.
And a really aggressive China in that one. You pointed out COVID-19 as a very important factor, and I totally agree with that. But do you feel that apart from this global factor as such, there are some India-specific factors that why India was picked for such kind of directly hostile acts, and not say Japan or China, South Korea or Taiwan?
That's a very intriguing point. Why India? If I see, like, in my opinion, so far, because undoubtedly India and China have managed to maintain a peaceful border, despite the border war in 1962 and successive fallouts and various standoffs we had, but still we managed. And going for an informal dialogue was, between the Xi Jinping and Narendra Modi, is an exemplar to that we have been capable of managing the crisis. But here we need to understand, we have managed the crisis, we have not resolved the crisis. So the border is a hotspot, which in my argument, which so far was protected, but now is volatile. So that brings that in change in discourse. Now choosing India and not others, you need to understand, in terms of Japan, China is one country which knows Japan's power because it has suffered an imperial Japan. So in Chinese perception, if I can put forward that enemy number one is Japan because it has suffered what Japan can do. United States, of course, if you see Taiwan, if you put an inch into Taiwan, the US is coming to the same. So let's not disturb that. So let's then disturb here, the border. The border, and also because China has become expansionist, and also, so far it's, well-touted salami slicing, which was very successful in South China Sea, artificial island built up, and then you claim your possessions, or rather others' possessions. With Doklam, we see that, they try to put forward the salami slicing technique in a land or a continental way. And we see a similar design in Eastern Ladakh. So there is a total Eastern Ladakh, or LSE for that matter. Why is it so? It's turbulent because of a perception difference. There is no concrete, dividing factor, because there's nothing demarcated on the ground. So between India and China, that is the fault line that exists. And with increasing forays of China, we see that intention is straight out clear that we don't want to maintain the status quo. Despite China, in 2019, December 2019, it said that we want to go for early harvest. But we need to understand what China says and what China does. There is a great difference to that. So it's our time to note that for China, the intention is not to resolve the border, because it's in the interest that keep the border active. And now I'm saying active. This is very important because so far we had a stable border. Now China is simultaneously activating various points. Not to forget, points which were earlier not under dispute. That is, so we need to understand there is a changing pattern in China's behavior. And choosing India because, China must be saying that Asian century, China, India coming together, but in Chinese mind, when it comes to Asia, China wants to dominate. It doesn't want another parallel power. So it will always try to, test your resolve, which China is doing, and what better than India. And Himalayan border, you need to understand that out of its 14 land border dispute, it is India and the border with Bhutan because of India that is yet not settled. And under Xi Jinping, the Chinese dream talks about great rejuvenation of Chinese nation, that is getting back your territories.
Yes.
So this will be a constant factor in Chinese behavior in a much magnified way. So this is how I would look at it.
A very elaborate insight indeed. I'd like to take this conversation towards BRI, Belt and Road Initiative. Why I'm bringing BRI in this whole recent Chinese aggression scenario against India is because many have been saying, and they have been saying this for quite some time, but it's indeed even more important in today's context, that China has been using coercive commercial diplomacy, and they have been using that to guide policy or behavior of host countries who are recipient of large BRI investments. So do you think, especially in India's context, in India's neighborhood in South Asia, do you think India needs to worry in the current scenario that diplomatically or politically India's neighbors might be seen as aligning towards China, aligning with China in if this conflict, it's not a conflict as such right now, but like if this in turn turns into a conflict, then do you think the diplomatic and political support from South Asian neighbors of India will be towards China and not India?
It's not an immediate phenomenon. It has been happening even before BRI.
Yes.
You need to understand that why is China entering into South Asia, like mainly countries to, especially with who are sharing a maritime border. So Pakistan, namely Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and then you see Nepal. So China's interest primarily through these countries is that I want a direct entry into Indian Ocean. So it still doesn't accept the parlance of Indo-Pacific. It still calls it Asia-Pacific, but you need to understand that Indian Ocean is the current battleground of great power rivalry because it is the business corridor. And you see all the entry ports, and China's Malacca dilemma rests in that sea lanes of communication. So China, as it rises, it will become more aspirational, and China wants to have a blue water navy, and it is the maritime power that that dictates at the end of the day in the current time frame. We are seeing from continent to maritime is the strategic shift that is taking place. Now coming to, should India be worried? Well, this has been happening. It is nothing new. So India, rather than being worried, India should be prepared. But there is also a factor that these countries also share strong relations with India, so they can't outrightly do away. Be it Sri Lanka in the current times, Sri Lanka had economic packages. Who gave the stimulus to Sri Lanka? It was India. Okay, so so you need to understand the trust factor. If it comes in, India will always have an edge. Yes, China will be an intervening factor, but a long term, if I see, I'll still say that it will be a tilt towards India, because at the end of the day, who is your immediate neighbor? India, not China. So China is trying to disturb that, but has it been able to? Somewhat, but not completely. It is not an immediate phenomenon. Yes, but specifically we need to understand that here China will choose select neighbors. So where the interests are like. So be it Pakistan, already China's ally rests in Pakistan. So we anyway don't expect that from Pakistan, that because we are constantly engaged in a conflict with Pakistan at all times. So now there can be an impetus that they then come together towards India in a much overt way, which has so far was covert. Like, this is how I see. Now, another factor that adds in is your abrogation of Article 370 here, because you took BRI and especially neighbors.
Yes.
That is also a trigger point, because which countries are affected with Pakistan and China. So that gives them another commonality, that why should we collude against India, because we need to get our map correct in our own interest. So if I get Eastern Ladakh in perspective, in a long-term view, this was a disturbing factor, an irritant in China's mind, that how could China do it? Because if you see Chinese statements, they said that Chinese land, they reiterated after 5th August, they said that how could, because they consider Ladakh, Union Territory of Ladakh, to be a part of SICHIN.
So abrogation of Article 370 was an important trigger point, an opportunity for China to come in.
It was a trigger point, not an opportunity. It was a trigger point and irritant. So if you, like, going back to your first question, that what caused Eastern Ladakh, if Covid-19 was an immediate trigger, Article 370, that is undoing India's act, was a constant irritant. How can I get, my course correct?
Okay.
So let me teach India a lesson on this front, that you can't get the map wrong with us, like not get it wrong side. So let me get the map right in my own way. So you see Galwan Valley happening. So this is, I can.
Very interesting point. The Article 370 aspect of this whole situation, I think it's an important point that has been raised by you. To conclude, I'd like to ask you one final question. We all know that China has been a very opaque power, and there's lack of information about the psyche of the Chinese government, the Chinese Communist Party as such. So we all know that the 50 years of 50-year plans that the Chinese have, and the President Xi's Chinese dream. So how do you see China moving ahead in the world from here on forward, and how do you feel that will affect India?
Here I would like to throw some light in an alternate way. In my view, China is no more that opaque as it used to be.
Okay.
Because if you see China's military parades, under Xi Jinping, it just lays out everything. You can see the assassin maze outright. So if it had to hide, why would it display? And it's just, under Xi Jinping, military parades have been very common. They are gigantic affair. It is both symbolic, but most importantly significant, because when you put your, ICBMs on display, your new technologies, your combined arms brigade, you're setting out that see where we are and where you are. So it might not give you a total picture, but it is giving you bits and parts. So it's upon us that we shouldn't get into that safety couch that China is opaque.
Yes.
There is lot on display. We have to read in between the lines, and we have to understand that what China wants to say. So on our part, that is our homework to do that. How is China doing it? White papers have become. It gives you transparency, because so far the debate was, does China have a national strategy? Does China have a military strategy? Because China doesn't come up with such a compendium as that of the US, calling it in those names. But it came out, 2015 white paper solely said China's military strategy. So it is saying, where it takes that, active defense is the essence of CPC thought. So it is telling you, now it's upon you how it is join the dots. How is China applying that theory into practice? So we can't say China is opaque. China is everything on display. For instance, in AI, China is leading now United States. If you go to 2020 US Congress report, it suggests that in many areas China has superseded the United States, be it shipbuilding, be it aviation. So these are where you are getting those pointers that China is taking over. So that is the reality of today, which we need to go deeper and take note of it.
Okay, but I understand that the transparency has been increasing to an extent. But how do you feel India-China ties will progress in short to medium term? Let's say 5 to 10 years, if we talk about that particular timeline. How do you think after this aggression, the recent hostilities, how do you think the bilateral ties will progress?
Bilateral ties, we firstly, our ties are more characterized by a border dispute and not by an economy. So, and on the economic side also, India is not on the right end because of the deficit.
The trade deficit.
Trade deficit, yes. So, in my, if I perceive how I perceive it, you need to take, I feel that India needs to change its China policy, way of looking at China. Everything is on the platter. You need to understand China doesn't want this status quo because it doesn't serve China's interest. To forget it that China is going to go back to the status quo ante. And secondly, with the rising criticism, China's acts will only get assertive, aggressive. So don't, envision a peaceful China. No more a peaceful China. Because if you're left alone, you have to fend for yourself. You have to be assertive because everyone else will not give you that room space. But we need to understand, does China want that room space? No. At least in India-China border dispute, that space to maneuver your concessions are not there, at least from Chinese side. And if it comes, it would want India to give the concessions, not China. So we need to be very clear on this in our mind.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Jash. Some very, very interesting points raised by you. Very informative talk and some really good insights. Thank you for coming to the program and thank you.
Thank you very much.